So it was then that the government decided that the entire sort of gamut of match fixing or so-called match fixing has to be investigated by an agency, and it came to CBI. So I was the SP, the supervisory officer of that inquiry, and I sort of planned the course of investigation. And of course, there are senior officers also, DIG and JD, etc. But largely, we didn't actually touch the Hansi-Kronia part, but looked into the role of Indian players of that generation.
That involved Azharuddin, Mohammad Azharuddin, and Ajay Jadeja and the likes.
Yeah, what we did was at the end of the inquiry, there was a legal opinion that match fixing per se in any sport is not a punishable crime. It doesn't come under even the purview of cheating, etc. That was the belief those days. So we sent our inquiry report with all the facts and documentation to the government, which sent it to the BCCI. And finally, BCCI conducted its own, we can call it a sort of departmental inquiry, and banned certain players from taking part in further, cricketing activity.
He was born in coffee plantations in Coorg, Karnataka. He studied in Chennai, Madras in those days, and Delhi. He is the real wanderer, as after joining Indian Police Services in 1986, he was allotted Uttar Pradesh cadre, but had to shift to Uttarakhand after creation of the new state in 2000. He rose to head the state's police force as the DGP. He also headed the elite NSG Commando Force. Mr. MA Ganapathy, after retirement from the service last year, has settled down in Coorg. We are fortunate to have him with us today. In the last episode aired recently, we talked about a book written by him on paranormal experiences of a cop. Today, we are going to speak to him about the services and his memories of it.
Welcome to Indian Masterminds, Mr. Ganapathy.
Thank you.
Sir, you have had a number of important assignments in your career. So, one was in CBI when you investigated match fixing episode. You have been with NSG. You have been with Uttarakhand Police. So, which assignment is closest to your heart?
To be honest, my favorite part of policing was always investigation.
Yeah.
And I can say with some degree of pride that, I really liked investigations and sort of had mastered the art of investigation to some extent, although nobody can be perfect. So that is the short answer. Investigation, whether with the state police or CBI or wherever, that's always been my favorite part of policing.
But I think the most high profile assignment you took over means you have been chief of BCAS and civil aviation sector of CISF, so many assignments. But I think the most prestigious or most talked about assignment was match fixing episode in which Hansi-Kronia was involved and sacked, and a number of players, Indian players, were also punished. So can you tell the readers, the Gen Zs who don't know much about that episode, how it happened and how you investigated that?
So this was actually subsequent to the Hansi-Kronia episode. Hansi-Kronia episode was actually cracked by the Delhi police during some surveillance they had on some bookies.
Yeah.
So consequent to that, there was a big hue and cry, and the names of a large number of Indian players also cropped up in a news portal. So it was then that the government decided that the entire sort of gamut of match fixing or so-called match fixing has to be investigated by an agency, and it came to CBI. So I was the SP, the supervisory officer of that inquiry, and I sort of planned the course of investigation. And of course, there are senior officers also, DIG and JD, etc. But largely, we didn't actually touch the Hansi-Kronia part, but looked into the role of Indian players of that generation.
That involved Azharuddin, Mohammad Azharuddin, and Ajay Jadeja and the likes.
Yeah, what we did was at the end of the inquiry, there was a legal opinion that, match fixing per se in any sport is not a punishable crime. It doesn't come under even the purview of cheating, etc. That was the belief those days. So we sent our inquiry report with all the facts and documentation to the government, which sent it to the BCCI. And finally, BCCI conducted its own, we can call it a sort of departmental inquiry, and banned certain players from taking part in further, cricketing activity.
I think there was a Raghavan committee report also in the match fixing episode involving.
Yeah, that was not Raghavan, Madhavan. Madhavan he was also an ex-CBI officer, but he was retired. He was appointed by the BCCI to go through the CBI inquiry and conduct, a sort of departmental inquiry that's applicable only to government departments, but to ensure due process, natural justice considerations, etc., take the version of the players again and stuff, and then give a report to BCCI on the basis of which they took this action against players at that point of time.
How many players were barred from playing for the country after that?
I really don't remember now after so many years. But I think around 4, 5, 8, 9 were given punishments varying to various degrees. Some were banned for life, some for some specific period of time. So it's a little distant memory, early 2000, or I think it was 2000 and 2001.
Right.
So I usually move sort of away from one part of my life to the other very quickly and forget the rest.
So before coming to the CBI,
yeah,
you were also SSP of 6 districts, including metros like Allahabad, Kanpur City, Meerut, Nainital. So, and that was a time when UP was going through a lot of political turmoil. So, what was the experience like heading all these metros and big cities?
To be fair, UP was a very, very good teaching ground for me and police officers in general. Those days we had very fine officers and also very good systems on how to control law and order, how to prevent and investigate crime. Those systems are very sound actually. And there were some officers, not all, who ensured that, those systems were kept intact and followed on ground. So UP, I'm extremely fond of my policing days in UP because it gave me great satisfaction, both in tackling law and order or crime. For example, I never faced a riot. Not faced a riot, even though I was in very sensitive districts.
Exactly.
I never, had to sort of put down a riot because the system taught me that there are ways and means through which a riot can be prevented through timely action. So it was a great learning ground. Unfortunately, that knowledge somehow got lost in the course of time. But now, as you know, riots are quickly put down if police have a professional approach in quelling it. But it was a great challenge, a great learning ground. And my advantage was that, because I was an outsider, I was regarded as very impartial and people appreciated neutrality and professionalism, and very fond memories of UP, policing in UP rather.
In fact, I was coming to that only. It was that part of contemporary history when UP was undergoing public agitations on Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid or Mandal Commission and such things. And the state went through complete political change from national parties like Congress to regional parties like SP, BSP, RLD. So, and the average tenure of a SSP or DM used to be in days, not even in months and years. So how you managed to hold on to such important districts despite such temporary or quick transfers?
Maybe it was luck, but it was also to some extent by design. So I always believe that, if you're straightforward, upfront, and have the interests of the district or the state in mind, even the politicians don't bother you beyond a point. And it is also my contention that quite often we second guess what the politicians want and start operating in that way as soon as the government changes or, there's a change in the political setup. So my approach was a little different. I sort of tried my level best to uphold the rule of law, because for a police officer, ultimately, rule of law is the ultimate concern. What the CRPC, the IPC tells you is the primary concern. So in that course, you do face challenges, you do face interference, you do get directives, but it has been my experience that I could negotiate. I could tell them that, whoever it was, regardless of the government, that no, this may not be the correct way of doing it. And it may not even give you any, political benefits if you do it that way. And quite often I found that, the politicians also readily agreed with it. So rather than creating a sort of system where I work solely on what they actually, I feel, may require, I sort of created a system where I could communicate with them, negotiate with them, and ensure to the best of my ability that the rule of law is not compromised. And maybe there was times when I couldn't do it, and that was the time I got sort of kicked out from here and there.
So which were those places?
that we can forget it. Then you'll next ask who was the politician and stuff like that. So that's, that's also part of rich memory. That's also a challenge, actually.
But what was your shortest tenure in a district?
I don't remember. I think there was a small district called Mao in UP. I think that was just 2 months or so. So otherwise, I had mostly stable tenures.
And the longest tenure in a district?
Longest would be my very first district, I think. Sonbhadra was my very first district. Nearly 3 years, if I remember. Yeah. And many changes in the government also.
Yeah, that is significant.
Yeah, that was my first independent charge, actually.
Very nice. And sir, those days, you must have faced at some point or the other, political pressure. कभी तो आपके ऊपर किसी politician ने pressure डाला होगा कि ऐसा करो.
वही मैंने बताया, वो तो कॉमन प्लेस है. पॉलिटिकल प्रेशर ये नहीं है कि केवल ऊपर से चीफ मिनिस्टर से आता है या किसी मंत्री से आता है. लोकल लेवल से भी MLAs, MPs, they all have a sort of stake in what happens in a particular place. तो जैसे मैंने अभी बताया, वो पार्ट एंड पार्सल ऑफ अ जॉब है. तो you can't just sit and sort of become very morose or depressed that ये बहुत political interference है, मैं काम करने नहीं दे रहे हैं. तो I could negotiate my way through, and quite often they were very reasonable. I think compared to civil servants, politicians have far more common sense and rational approach to things, and they're not that rule bound also. So if you could tell them that this can't be done, and even you may not reap too much political benefit out of it, generally they agreed. Sometimes they got angry, but just anger did not always result in sort of me getting thrown out. Basically, because ultimately, if you give decent policing to the people, and people develop faith in you over a period of time, the politicians also find it difficult to remove such officers.
So, is there a lesson in this that in even political hotbeds like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, competence also matters more than political leanings?
Competence definitely matters, because these places, especially states like UP, Bihar, have very diverse policing problems. So if you put up a very incompetent officer who is very politically pliable, maybe it'll work for some time. When the real issues crop up, policing issues crop up, he'll be found wanting and the public opinion will turn. So इस वजह से it's always the case that competent officers को value किया जाता है इस देश में, कहीं भी हो.
So after CBI posting, you returned to the home cadre, but this time your home had changed.
Yeah.
From UP to Uttarakhand. And Uttarakhand is known to be a peace-loving state.
Yeah.
So was it a big relief or what?
No, to be honest, initially I was extremely sad.
Okay.
Yeah, that my cadre changed from UP to Uttarakhand. But then when I sort of finally got to Uttarakhand, the approach changed because I loved the state for its simplicity, landscape, the mountains. I mean, it's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
And when you go beyond the towns and cities, I mean, the life in the villages, it's really idyllic. So, उस हिसाब से compensation था. But as you say, the professional challenges were far fewer. But then there are very peculiar characteristics in such places also. वहाँ कोई छोटे मामले जो है, वो बड़े हो जाते हैं. So whereas in UP, all the big things, people don't really care that much. In a smaller place, even small things get magnified. So वो challenge है.
Yeah, that is what I was going to ask. What was the challenges of policing a new state?
Resources and the literacy level is higher in Uttarakhand. So people are far more aware of their rights, human rights, and stuff like that. And also, the towns have diverse set of people. बाहर से भी काफी लोग हैं. So it was a interesting experience. Uttarakhand was also a very interesting experience, and ultimately it became my cadre, and they were kind enough to appoint me as the DGP of the state also.
In Uttarakhand, you managed one of the biggest congregation of human beings, the Haridwar Kumbh. So what kind of challenge did it bring to you? Yeah,
I was the IG during the Mahakumbh 2010, I think. So it was a major challenge. Haridwar is a little different from Prayagraj because the area where the Mahakumbh takes place in Haridwar is far less the surface area. So the challenges of managing a crowd in a very confined space is almost, it defies logistics. I mean, it's very challenging. So we had very competent officers who could study all the past kumbhs and come up with blueprints and stuff like that. I mean, there was the institutional memory of previous kumbhs also. So basically, we studied the mistakes which were committed earlier, the mishaps which occurred earlier, and finally we managed to come up with a very well-organized kumbh. Although on the very last day, the surge of crowds was almost unbelievable. I mean, it was far beyond what we expected, and that became a really major challenge. But the SOPs were very sound. In any large congregation, there is a very simple sort of theory that if you manage to keep people moving in concentric circles, there is a far less possibility of a stampede. So that is a very basic principle. So how you apply it to a particular organization, whether it's Kumbh or a large gathering of any sort, is up to the police officer concerned. But this is a fundamental principle which, policing is all basics. Wherever basics are sound, the results are good. Where you leave basics and go for window dressing or event management, then there is a possibility that you may come up with unexpected problems.
Besides other things, Haridwar seems to be more dangerous because the water current is very high. So if somebody slips,
Yeah.
so there is very high possibility of somebody getting drowned.
Yeah, compared to Prayagraj.
Prayagraj.
So you need a very strong component of river police, boats, divers. So that is the standard operating procedure. We get resources from all over the country, even from the central government. So that's not a major issue. But then, in spite of your best efforts, still some people do drown, and there are cases which happen, especially beyond the main Harki Paudi. If you go a little to the lower stream, there also people do take ritual bath and stuff like there. The resources are a little thinly spread. Sometimes mishaps do occur.
And after that, sir, you went to CISF, especially the aviation sector, to man their aviation sector, and at the BCAS you headed Bureau of Civil Aviation Security. So what were the key measures you introduced in the civil aviation security sector?
See, civil aviation security is a very niche kind of policing area. So it was new to me also. So I took nearly 4-5 months to understand how it works. So I went through there is a international organization called International Civil Aviation Organization that sort of lays down rules and procedures for aviation security throughout the world. The basic principle of aviation security is that you have to have uniform standards across the world because people travel from one country to another. They shouldn't be faced with sudden new kind of protocols. So ICAO lays down those protocols. Those protocols are further refined by Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, which is the regulator of India. And then based on those protocols, you ensure the security in the airports. So what I tried was to try to minimize human interface with the passengers and use technology as a means to do the security checks quickly, and also train personnel to be more professional in the dealings with the passengers, because air passengers are slightly different. They're more educated, they come from more affluent sections of society, so they're more demanding. And they're also sometimes very quick to take fights with enforcement people. So that requires a different kind of approach and sensitivity and training. And at the same time, a small problem in an airport or a small security lapse in an airport gets highlighted in the media all over. And if it's a serious lapse, then India's ratings can also go down in the international, ICAO ratings, and that has serious repercussions in many ways. So it was a very niche area and very interesting area of policing. So I was fortunate to have gone through that experience. So as I said, I learned, I studied, and finally I could implement some improvements in the ecosystem.
And then, sir, you manned the NSG, which is supposed to be the best, not only in India, maybe the world. So how was your experience in Manesar?
So NSG, as you know, is the federal contingency force. When all other forces cannot tackle a particular situation, NSG is called to terminate that kind of scenario, whether it's a terror-related scenario or a hijacking, etc. So it was a very interesting stint in the sense that the composition of NSG is very diverse. Whereas all my life I dealt only with policemen or paramilitary. So this was a combination of paramilitary, army, and within the army, various branches of army and the police. So each came with their own work cultures, institutional outlook, So it was a challenge to harmonize all those diverse skills into a single kind of a force where, the outlook merges properly and you are able to deliver whenever you are called upon to do so. So that calls for a great deal of, communication, training, and also understanding different work cultures. So it's a very unique experiment, actually. Nowhere in the world you find a force like NSG, because it's so diverse and at the same time has a sort of single goal to eliminate the highest form of terror or hijacking. So it was again a learning experience as well as satisfying experience in the sense I could blend all those diverse cultures into one single unit.
So NSG, as I said, is considered as one of the best trained commandos. So how do you rate them as compared to, say, Navy SEALs or Navy or Marines or maybe Israeli forces?
So it's very difficult to compare one force with another because the challenges each force faces is very different. What we face in India is very different from what the Navy SEALs may face. But broadly speaking, they're up there with the best in terms of their physical ability to deal with the situation, the firing skills, and also the emotional, sort of intelligence which is required, the situational reality which is required to deal with a serious kind of terror outbreak. So they're up there with the best, but you can't really rank somebody as number one, number two, because there used to be some competition, international competition earlier, I think, but of late I've not heard of.
But there are joint exercises also.
Joint exercises always happen. So then we learn from each other. Especially equipment and technology.
If you could tell the audience, I think that it will be great learning for them also. What kind of training, if in a nutshell you can tell the audience, what kind of training is imparted to?
See that I can't really disclose the kind of exact kind of training they undergo.
Yeah.
But then it is a combination of extreme endurance, extreme sort of strength also, body strength, extreme firing skills, and also emotional strength, mental strength. So how exactly they're trained, that's something which can't be
disclosed. The country knows NSG commandos from their action during Mumbai terror attack. So that took NSG about 4 days to control and eliminate all the terrorists. And it took NSG almost 8 to 10 hours to reach Mumbai, the terror attack places. So why was such a delay, and what steps have been taken so far to reduce the action response time?
See, as you know, any organization evolves over time. But at the same time, one also needs to be extremely alert to any kind of, unimaginable situation. So that should be the ethos of an organization. As you said, I don't really want to go into the details of, you said, the reach late, etc. But all I want to emphasize is that, the organization takes every experience as a learning experience and builds up its competency to ensure that, if mistakes are committed, they're not repeated. So right now I can say with confidence that if there is a contingency, the time taken will be far less and the intervention will be far quicker and the competency will be much higher.
I think it was earlier centralized only at Manesar. Now we have a couple of, or maybe 3-4 more centers where NSG has been stationed.
Yes, it has expanded to other metros also.
Yeah, so the response time will be
much lesser. Naturally lesser.
Yeah. So did it ever occur to you while seeing them train that to train with them, or did you actually train with the commandos ever?
No. Commandos are of much younger age. I think if I train with them, I won't last too long. So our commando typically is below the age of 35. I mean, maybe the supervisory officers are a little more. But basically what you do is you ensure that they get the best training. You ensure that the best SOPs are put in place. So ensure that if need be, they reach in a very quick time. And also to ensure that, whatever situation calls for, the response is ideal. That is the job of the leadership of the force, not actually to go and fight, because that's actually done by the people who are better trained to do that and who have a younger profile and physical capabilities.
So before we end, sir, let me talk about your last assignment. That was the DGP of Uttarakhand. So how did you find the job, and what were your key contributions to streamline and make the force more efficient?
It was a very satisfying tenure for me, because I could streamline much of the working of the force in a very short time. Streamlining included SOPs to approach any particular problem, whether it's law and order or even investigation of different kinds of crime. We could lay down all those SOPs so that there is standardization. The biggest problem with policing is non-standardization of responses to a given situation. Individual officers take their own sort of personal experiences into situations and deal with any a given problem in slightly different ways at times. So the moment we standardize responses, even the force will be in tune with what is expected, what is required. So one, I did standardize how we should approach different kinds of law and order problems by way of formulating SOPs, doing mock drills, etc. And also investigations, how to do justice to even small minor investigations like theft, burglary, etc. So they were also laid down. Then I did start some community policing modules which are suited to local conditions. Community policing can't be an end in itself to showcase it to media, etc. Community policing ultimately should result in reduction in crime or improvement in law and order in a particular place. So we tailor-made certain community policing interventions based on requirements and had them implemented. So it was a good tenure. Although the crime and the law and order challenges are not so much like some parts of the country, but I think the people appreciated whatever little I could do there.
So I think that was a very engaging conversation with you, sir, and the readers and audience will also draw a lot from this interview. Thank you so much for.
Thank you so much. And before I leave, I would urge your viewers and readers to look into this book which I have written, which is rather different. It is not about my memoirs or professional policing matters, but something a little different. So that's basically, I have this creative urge, so I thought I should come up with something after I hang my boots. Thank you very much.